You don't need to spend hundreds of dollars on a camera just to get good photos. You can use your smartphone, and you just need to know how to do it. Hello, I'm Noah from Anything Cameras, the channel that focuses on helping you improve your filming and photography. Alright, so here I have my smartphone. This is just a Motorola G7 Power. It's a $250 smartphone, and it's 3 or 4 years old. So it's pretty much the lowest end smartphone that anyone would buy, and even smartphones around the same price that are a couple years newer are going to have even better cameras. Even phones older than this, maybe the older iPhones or the older Google Pixels, are gonna have better cameras than this. But today I'm gonna show you that even with something as simple as a $250 smartphone, you can get really great looking photos. So, where do we start? Well, first off, I encourage you to follow along as I do this process, as I get the best photos from this as I can. There are a few different steps I'm going to walk through, and the first one is just opening your default camera app, and we're going to take a picture of something. Wherever you are, just grab something that's around you. I'm going to grab this little Grogu bobblehead figure, and I'm going to take pictures of this. So, I have my default camera app open. It's just called Camera. It's very basic, has very few features. And I'm going to set this down on the table and I'm going to take a picture of it. Okay, as you can see, this photo's fine. Nothing spectacular, nothing amazing. Here it is enlarged on the screen for you. But it's not great quality. We have some highlights that are being blown out. It just doesn't look that appealing. So what are the first steps to getting a better photo? Well, what I like to do first is focus on the lighting and the composition of the photo. The lighting in this photo, I have studio lights in here, but they're shining on me, so they're not meant to light this. So as I said, we have that hot spot, those highlights in the background. The rest of it is almost in shadow. So I'm going to turn off this desk lamp here, and I'm going to swing this light around so that it's pointing at the Grogu bobblehead. And then also, I'm going to think about the composition of my photo. I'm at a higher angle here, and so I'm going to try a few different angles. I might go more head-on, I might go slightly below, I might go to one side, I might not center him in the frame. I'm going to kind of play around, see what looks nice, okay? So I'm going to do that now. Now, of course, you probably don't have studio lights, just in your room on arms mounted to the wall in order to take photos like this. So what can you do? Well, you can use window light instead. And actually, I'm about to post a blog article that's probably out by the time you're watching this, all about using natural light in portrait photography both inside and outside. So maybe you can find some tips there, but you don't just want to use the ceiling light in your room. It's much, much better to go near a window or go somewhere where you have some nice natural light coming in and use that light there. Alright, so here we have the other photos, the new ones that I've taken, and already these are looking way, way better. We have nice light, we have better composition, so just compare this photo to the one we took originally. The difference is just night and day, and of course these concepts apply to almost any type of photography. If you get the lighting and the composition nailed, or at least better than what's in this photo, the photo is already going to be a good photo. But we can take it a bit further. The next thing I like to do is download a better camera app. Now, the more recent iPhones actually have a really good camera app with some kind of pro mode, to my understanding, that will give you manual controls over the file type and the exposure triangle and all of that. But if you have a very poor default camera app like comes on this phone, then it's a much better idea to download a different app that gives you controls over those variables. The one I like for Android, well, they're free. Well, there are 3 ones that I like, all for different reasons. They each have some different features. You can try them all out, see what you like. These are called a better camera, open camera, and footage camera 2. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that correctly. It's Footej. But all of these camera apps are free on the Google Play Store. They all grant you some level of manual control, and I think they all work really well and get you better files than what the default app on this phone. So I'm just going to open Footage Camera 2, and I'm going to screen record here and show you how I might set this up. Okay, I'm now screen recording. Got my camera app open here. You can see my setup a little bit. Let's get this set up. So the first thing I want to do is make sure I'm in photo mode. Obviously, if you're taking photos, photo mode is going to be important. The next thing I'm going to do is go up to settings and just configure a few of the settings. You won't need to do this every time, just when you first install the app. So under general, the JPEG quality, I would usually put it to high or excellent, but that actually is only in the pro mode of this app. The rest of these you don't really need to touch. In the photo section, I want to make sure the resolution is at the maximum that it can. So for the back camera, that's 12.6 megapixels, and for the front camera, that's 8 megapixels, as you can see there. Other than that, you can do the storage location and the file name prefix if you want to. I've already configured those to my liking, so I won't be doing that. Then, let me take another photo. Let me swing this light back around. So what I did there was I swung the light over again. Again, you're probably near a window or something. Then I adjusted the composition how I wanted to. I tried to kind of mimic one of the earlier shots I did. I then tapped where I wanted it to focus, and I set the exposure myself. So I didn't want any motion blur in the image, so I was able to set the shutter speed to what I wanted it to be, and then I adjusted the ISO as necessary. And even with big studio light, chances are with a phone you're going to have to boost that ISO kind of high. It's unfortunate, but these don't have the same apertures as my f1.4 lens. And by the way, if you don't know what these terms are, ISO, shutter speed, aperture, f1.4, then you can check out our video on the exposure triangle that's in the cards above one of these directions. I always forget which it is. But comparing the file quality, there's not a huge difference immediately. I wasn't shooting RAW in that example. That app I don't think actually allows you to shoot RAW, at least with my phone. So we would definitely see a big difference there if I were shooting RAW. Chances are you have the option to do that. I encourage you to select that option if you plan to edit later on. So, pixel peeping in, there's a slight difference. I think that the footage camera one is definitely just a little bit more detailed, a little bit sharper. But I think that when we go into editing and we start messing around with files, we'll see that the footage one definitely has more data to work with. But even if you download a camera app and you can't really get better quality files, and this is even very minimal, then the camera app still gives you several advantages. For instance, this will allow me to shoot slow motion video. That's something that the default camera app doesn't allow me to do for some reason. It also allows me to manually select my resolution, which already is a step above that default camera app. It also has HDR, and oh, look at that. There's the RAW setting. It's actually a shooting mode, if the camera would focus there. So let me take one more photo of this in the RAW setting and we'll see how it does. So here's that RAW file. We can see that it's actually a little bit brighter than the JPEG was, and I think there's definitely more detail in this image. It looks sharper to me, but again, we'll see when editing. That's when we'll really see the difference. Okay, so the last step that I like to do to get better photos from your phone is edit them, and you can do this in your default Photos app. I'm sure it'll have adjustments for saturation, exposure, vibrance, maybe even white balance, certainly crop, but I like to download another app to do this that will grant you more control. It'll work better, and that is Adobe Lightroom. They actually have a free mobile version. Okay, and now we can go ahead and add a photo to our library. Allow device storage access. I'm going to go ahead and select this RAW photo here, add that. And I'll just kind of walk you through my general editing process. Give you a few tips about what different settings do, but you can also watch our Lightroom for Beginners video, and yeah, that's on the full paid version of Lightroom on the desktop, but a lot of those settings are still in this app, and so you should be able to use them. So let me go to all photos here, select this photo. Okay, so to edit this, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the exposure, and that's in the little light option here. And it looks just a little bit overexposed to me. Exposure is just the brightness of your image, and so adding exposure will make it brighter, subtracting exposure will make it darker, and you can just do this based on your eye. Make sure your phone screen brightness isn't super high or super low. But I think about half a stop less is good. Then this is a RAW photo, and RAW photos, in case you don't know, are just the raw data off the sensor, so the computer isn't doing anything to process the photo. And so what the camera sees is actually what you're getting here, and it's a very flat looking image. That means there's not a lot of contrast, not a lot of saturation, so we definitely want to add some contrast here. I like about 42. We'll bring down the highlights in the background just a little bit, and that's just reducing the exposure of the bright parts of the areas. Shadows, likewise, is adjusting the brightness of the dark parts of the image. So you can see if I bring the shadows all the way up, all those dark parts were brightened, effectively lowering the contrast. And if I go with the shadows all the way down, all those dark parts of the image are darkened. So I don't think there's really any need to touch the shadows in this one. The whites and the blacks of the image are similar to the highlights and the shadows, but instead of it being based on exposure, it's actually based off of color, because white and black are also colors basically, so you can have white parts of the image that aren't overexposed, that it still brings down or brings up the exposure of, and you still have black parts of the image that it adjusts the exposure of. Now we could apply a crop to this image. I could just crop in like that, because we do have some of that lamp in there, and now there's less of it in the shot. But especially with a smartphone, you have to be careful when cropping. You don't want to crop too far in, because you're just deleting pixels, and when you delete too many pixels, you just don't have enough resolution, and the photo looks all pixelated and grainy. The next thing we can do is go to color. I can adjust the temperature, which is just the warmness or coolness of the photo, effectively how much blue or yellow is put in, and I can just warm that up like that. The tint is the other aspect of white balance, which is how the camera sees white, basically, so that, you know, if you're working with super yellow house lights, then your camera can adjust the white balance so that it interprets white things as still being white instead of yellow, which, you know, if you have yellow house lights shining on a white surface, it's going to be more yellowy. Vibrance and saturation, there is a difference between the two, but basically this just adds more pop to the colors. Like so. We could add some effects. We could add just a touch of clarity. This is similar to digital sharpening, and it'll just make your image look a little bit more crisp. But you need to be careful, because if you add too much, then you're going to get this weird graininess in the image, which just isn't good. And if we zoom in here, we can actually see we are getting quite a bit of graininess in there, so I might actually remove that clarity. And that doesn't really seem to have affected it a whole lot. That's because a lot of that graininess is just a digital noise from the ISO. Again, watch that exposure triangle video. So we should also be able to, somewhere in here, apply some noise reduction to try to get rid of that graininess. Yeah, here it is. So, again, you only want to add a little bit of this, because if you add too much, instead of it being too grainy, it won't be grainy enough, and it'll look all smooth, but in a bad way. We can go up to sharpening. I always like to add some sharpening, maybe around 60, and then I also like to mask it. And what masking does is this will tell the editor what parts of the image to sharpen. So you can't actually see it here, but basically when you apply masking, you're telling the editor to only apply sharpening to the lines in the image, effectively. So you can see an example of that here. Without masking, it's sharpening the whole thing, but when you apply masking, then the white parts, by the way, are what's being sharpened, then it only applies it to the lines of the image. By the way, we are soon releasing a mini-series on photography. Takes you through storytelling, lighting, settings, composition, all this different stuff, and you can do it all with only a smartphone. The playlist for this mini-series will be right here if it is out already.